for this presentation, because it's such a special event, the 10-year anniversary of the International Flameworkers Conference, I wanted to sort of step back a little bit from criticism, because I'm going to try to cover and focus on the actual artwork of the artists who are assembled here. As you may have heard earlier, most of the artists who've been featured over the last 10 years are in attendance, and they will be giving demonstrations over the course of the next 2 days of the conference. So I wanted to give a chance for the artwork to come forward, and I'm going to make some observations about the artwork. My presentation last year did have more of a kind of a critical angle and a critical stance on flameworking, and some observations and some suggestions and some prodding for the glass artists working in flame. This year I'm going to really try to document and show and give a flavor for some of the people whose work has been honored in years past, as well as talk a bit about Paul. And I also want to show you a bit about their work as well, because they're going to be here, they're all gathered. This is going to be the center for the flameworking in the world, not just in the United States, over the next 48 hours. And I wanted to make sure that their artwork and their personalities and a bit about their career is mentioned tonight, so that we can all appreciate what this event is all about. I named the title of the talk is High Flame, and what do I mean by high flame? This is not Paul working on a bee's wing or one of his incredibly delicate flowers. This is actually Paul working with getting ready to encase one of his botanical paperweights, in which case he needs a lot of heat, and he needs to really turn up the flame on his torch to heat up the clear glass that's going to encase. But I thought it was an appropriate image, not only because the high flame is what I think Paul represents in many ways symbolically, his intensity, which comes forward in this picture, of course, just in the literal sense of the flame, but I think Paul also brings an incredible intensity to everything he does. And we all know the jovial sort of Santa Claus Paul that we've been seeing on display this evening, and so endearingly. I think there's another side of Paul, and I think anybody who knows him well is aware of that incredible intensity and drive, the drive that has brought him to the point where he is now, coming from a scientific background, pioneering and blazing new territory in the possibilities for using this process that he was trained in as a glassblower, making scientific instruments, but being able to apply those same in service of a vision that was an absolutely unique vision, and one that was incredibly difficult. So Paul, I think that high flame is partly an expression of what I think Paul's drive and energy has brought to the International Flameworking Conference. Now this conference, I'll just tell you a little bit about it, was it was actually coming out of conversations between Dr. Contini, who you've also met, and Paul. I think that the time in the year 2000, when they were having this discussion before the conference was started, was probably a critical time. Like in a lot of areas of glassblowing, globalization was affecting probably the career opportunities for domestic scientific glassblowing. It certainly has affected the design world for glass as well. And I'm sure to some degree there might have been questions about the viability in the future of making a program only about design as we're going forward, looking into the 21st century. Out of that conversation, Paul's intensity and drive came to the fore, and a very ambitious program was started. The first year was 2001, when there was a real attempt to raise awareness about flameworking as an artistic medium and to claim the center for flameworking as Salem Community College. Now, there is a precedent in history in studio glass, which is going to celebrate its 50th year, and that really represents all types of creative expression in glass. It's called the studio glass movement. It has been called the studio glass movement. Many people say it started in 1962 at a set of workshops at the Toledo Museum of Art, led by Harvey Littleton. A very important detail there is you had an artist and a visionary, and you had an institution. In that case, it was the Toledo Museum of Art. And there have been many books written about the history of studio glass, and many of them point to this as the moment of the birth of a movement. One of the important elements of it was that there was an institution behind it. It wasn't just Harvey Littleton's intensity, but it was also coming together with an institution that was able to support him and give him forum. I think something similar is happening, and I think in the years forward, when the history of glass is being written and when the history of flameworking in particular is being discussed, I think those conversations and that first conference here in Salem might be seen in similar ways. I think it's very likely. In addition to the artists who have attended, the event has evolved over the last 10 years in conjunction with the institution that hosts it. What started out as February conference has become an event now happening regularly in March. As we see it from around us, the first conference was only a Friday and a Saturday. There was no banquet. The next year, there was a conference, had a Saturday evening event at the Wheaton Village, now called Wheaton Arts. There was the first night of the banquet, which is continuing, and tomorrow night there will be a banquet as well. In 2004, they introduced a pre-conference session where there was discussions about the issues facing an artist from a more business point of view, practical issues of being an artist. In 2009, there was the introduction of the Samuel Jones Glass Center with the Paul Stankert Studio, which was a major event and I think a sign really of a stronger institutional presence, a strengthening of the glass program with other organizations like the local utility company getting involved. And then in 2010, we have all the featured artists gathered here. This is really a landmark. And if this is your first time, you really are very lucky to be attending this particular one, just the firepower in the room tonight. And in this conference, you really lucked out. The demonstrations are going to be incredible for the next 2 days. So this is the conference to attend. And if you've been to other ones, this will really be, I think, the ultimate experience. So I'm going to try to talk quickly. Now there's been a lot of artists, and I'm going to apologize in advance for the shortness of the amount of time I can talk about each artist, but I'm going to try to get some visual imagery to go along with all the words that you've been hearing so far tonight. We've been hearing from very many people. I'd now like to let the work speak a little bit for itself. We're going to start with Robert Michelson. Let's see. I would like to say a little bit about the iconography and some of the references. This is a piece from the year 2005. It involves some paint. It involves in a lot of Michelson's work, there's an exploration. There's a lot of sense of discovery. And in this case, I think we're really looking at work that is obviously somewhat botanical. There's a process of painting which is not consistent throughout Robert's work, but this is certainly a piece that shows the drive and the discovery, the sense of exploration. I chose this slide for a number of reasons, but one of the aspects of it that I thought was important was the angular roots of this object, which is something we'll see, I think, in a lot of Robert's work, even as it switches from different materials, different techniques, in a real hunger for new directions and new discoveries. There seems to be a consistent rootedness, and by that I don't mean, I mean it is connected to the ground, but visually there's almost either a branch shape or this sort of angular organic form that comes through in a lot of the different pieces. This piece is called Van Allen's Tier. I don't have an exact reference for what that title refers to. I did a little bit of research. There is a radiation belt that was discovered in the 1950s and confirmed that's held in place by the Earth's gravity. I considered that might be a possibility. It might be a personal reference. But again, we have this lattice of this repeated motif of a kind of a branch organic form. In the middle, we have a Graal technique, an engraving, revealing layers of color that is a pattern, almost like an op art type of pattern inside this armature. Be interested to find out from Robert later about the resonance of the title. The meaning of the title is from 2001, the same year that he was invited as the featured artist. This is a piece that came shortly after the conference, and I think is a testament to the power of the conference to connect people. Robert was writing about his Portland series shortly after the conference in 2001 when he met and talked to some other flame workers from out west, specifically from Portland, Oregon, who were telling him a little bit about lathes and how you were not limited by the width of your arms as you are working at the torch when you have a lathe to hold the piece and to turn the piece. So Robert actually went out to Portland and did a series, which he called the Portland series, and that includes this piece here from 2001, later that same year after the conference. It's called Cobalt Branch. And I think it's a good example of some of the cross-fertilization that this conference makes possible. It's not only a sort of a celebration, it's also a coming together and an interchange between artists from the East Coast and the West Coast from different countries, a sharing of technique, and that also builds and improves the skill level of everybody in a way that's very important for a movement. I chose this piece, it's called Goblets for Santa Fe. It's from 2009, very recent. But I also wanted to show the strong folk art influence, I think, on Michelson's work. We see a number of motifs in the stems of these goblets, everything from chili peppers in the sort of clear Santa Fe reference to some of these more maybe Mexican folk art, or even you could trace the iconography of the piece on the far right, possibly to Spain and Gothic medieval architecture or decorative artwork. I think that this almost Gothic and angular framing, again, we see the branch shape, that kind of organic rootedness that I think is the one common denominator in a lot of Robert's work. Of course, the goblet form. It's a free mixing of different iconographies, from the Santa Fe chili pepper to the goblet form itself, which is a historic glass form. This is called Network Venus 2 on your left, Coca-Cola on the right. Network Venus 2 is from 2009, Coca-Cola is from 2008. We actually did an article in the magazine about Brent Key Young, who does something similar with Pyrex networks, making these forms. I know that Robert wrote about in some of his writings about how he was suddenly liberated from scale. Again, he was looking to the Portland series to get larger. Here he's looking to these network canes to create in larger scale, which is something that is a big issue in flameworking. Unfortunately, the process is very intensive and it tends to work small. Artists now, as we're seeing, taking a variety of inspirations and a variety of influences from that cross-fertilization, are expanding. And in our day and age, with large-scale galleries, museums becoming ever larger, work needs, in some cases, to be larger to be seen. And I think this is a great example of Robert's ambitious drive to find new ways of expression. And again, I would say we find that same angular branch form. Finally, we have goblets for Salem. This is from this year. This is some of the newest work I could find of Robert's, and I wanted to find out a little bit about some of the imagery. I'm wondering if the leaf motif in the second stem from the left is possibly connected to Paul Stankert's work. I would like to ask him. I encourage everyone to chat with him afterward about some of the meaning of some of these goblet stems, but this is his most recent work, and I wanted to show that as well. So we're going to move on, because we've got a lot of people to cover here. Okay, Lucio Bubacco. This is 2000. He was the 2002 featured artist. Lucio is from deeply within the glass traditions of Venice and Murano. This is a piece from his epic installation, and I'm going to focus my conversation. Lucio is known for his remarkable ability to render the human form in glass. He studied anatomy with a master in Venice, and he is uncanny how he can tease out of soda lime glass, the way it drips and the way it pulls from the flame, these forms that become absolutely human, convincing in a second. When you look at them, they're nothing else but human, and it's very unforgiving, the form and the size and the way he puts them together, but it's just a bravura performance. This is a piece from his Eternal Temptation installation. I'll just do a very quick story about this history of this piece. This was shown in the 2008 SOFA Chicago exhibition. It's a life's work. It's the ultimate production I think every glassblower or every flame worker can imagine. Lucio had a vision. He was envisioning an installation scale work done out of flame. It has to do with religious themes, but it's not specific to any one religion. It has to do with good and evil. But he envisioned it in a very Venetian vernacular. These are in flame-worked, there's vessels, there's cups, there's a table set in the center, there is a figure on a boat, sort of torn between good and evil, the Paradiso being the paradise and the heaven, and Inferno being the underworld. This is a drawing that he brought to an art dealer named Muli Litvak in the years before 2008. And this Israeli art collector, who's since gone on to open a museum and gallery in Tel Aviv, was so impressed with Muli's vision that he commissioned him to realize it and spend a year completely at Muli, the collector's expense, to create and make real this vision that he had had. And this is a rendering as they were planning for their exhibition at SOFA